My name is Rick Green. I'm the editor at the Meadville Tribune. I'm here with Congressman Mike Crowley, who we have the pleasure of him stopping in and just talking about some things in the district. And first, we'd just like to start off. What's on your agenda here for 2026?
Well, our agenda is always the same. We try to be in all different parts of our district to make sure we're getting the local feel for what's going on, because it seems to me people get a lot of their news now from national TV, and they start to believe that's actually what's going on. And we said, well, really, I guess that's important in some places, but where we're from, what's important is the people we represent. So we've always taken it that way. I think that's the best way to go after it. That's who we represent.
And what are you hearing right now on the streets? What are you trying to push to get through?
Well, we're not trying to push anything. I think more than anything else, there's a negative comments out there about the situation the country's in and how bad it is and everything else. When you look at what really is going on, there is a difference between 4 years ago and today. When we talk about inflation, we don't use that, and we use the term affordability. And if I had been in charge when you were having double-digit inflation, I would have wanted to change it to affordability. When you see inflation, or at least what we would call inflation, down to 2% or a little bit over 2%, that's pretty good. When you see gasoline coming down in a lot of places under $3 a gallon, as opposed to over $4 a gallon, that's pretty good. And I think more than anything else, we have a much broader approach to what's going on globally, and I think that's where a lot of the news is what are we doing in Greenland, what are we doing overseas, how are we trying to shore up, where are we weak, where are we strong, and where do we need to be really strong. And I think more than anything else, our Northern Hemisphere, both the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary were pretty explicit early on about what America had to look at in the future as to what did we need to keep safe, what did we need to keep in our perspective of what it was that was important and who we didn't want coming in. And I think those leaders back then saw something happening that actually we've let happen. We built the Panama Canal and we turned it back over to Panama. The Chinese are at both ends of the canal right now, on both sides of all 55 miles of the canal. The Russians are in the deep water ports in Cuba. I remember different times when they had the Cuban Missile Crisis going on, and those were big things at that time. But as time goes by, those things don't seem to be on the front pages, on the headlines, on the news at night. There's other things, and I think that when you look at it now, there's a much more threat globally than we've had in a long time. When we look at where we're strong, where we're weak, where we need to be stronger, we need to be stronger almost every place right now. And we need to have our long-time friends who we've actually saved back in World War II and who we continue to save throughout the ages, need to understand that if you really believe that the United States is your greatest threat, then you're not very well informed. Now, I know, and I tell people all the time, they talk to me about NATO, I said, well, go back. I'm not going to school you on this. Go back and find out when NATO was formed, why it was formed, and find out what 4 countries were in it. And they'll say, well, no, there's more than that. I said, there's more than that now, but go back to the beginning to see what the concern was. It was right at the end of World War II. We had gone through a horrible war, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to contain things as we went into the future. But unfortunately, as things age on, people stop worrying about things. I think that's not really an issue. Well, it's not an issue if we don't look at it as an issue. So there's a lot of things going on that I think we're worried about. But again, for this district, we're looking at the same things we always do. We'll make sure that people are able to build homes where people have families that they can raise, that we have stability when it comes to our employment. And we have all those things in place, then it's a lot easier than to look to the future and say, this is going to be a good place for my wife, my kids. We're going to be able to sustain a nice living here. And I think that's what we look at. And I think one of the things that we don't talk about anymore is at one point, and it was not too long ago, Pennsylvania was called the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. And we've kind of forgotten that we have these assets right now, and we've kind of gotten away from that and looking in different directions. We have a very stable economy here, and it's building now. We're seeing people come back into this area that weren't here before. Some left years ago, some are starting up again. We're looking at all the advantages that we have. So mainly our job is just keeping an eye on what it is that we can keep an eye on, and what the federal government, what its role is in participating in these districts. So I have great confidence in our state legislature. They should be out in front. Local politics is always the most important thing, we try to stay in touch with whomever we can in whatever area that we're in the same area where we represent and they represent. Make sure we're touching gloves with them, making sure we're on top of whatever it is that is what they look at as a critical piece for them.
I know healthcare is at the forefront for a lot of people. With tax credits expiring, the deadline to sign up for Pennsylvania's penny program came. People are seeing their healthcare expenses going up. I know the president proposed maybe money going to health savings accounts. Is that something you would get behind, or do you have a different plan in mind?
Well, we actually were on health. Yeah, we were actually on health savings accounts years ago. But I think, again, you look at what's happened. So when people say, well, the subsidies are no longer there, but the subsidies came out during COVID. They were sunset under the Biden administration. They were sunsetted at the end of last year. So it's not like there was something we didn't know was coming. The question was, why did we have them there to begin with? And if that crisis is over, why is this? And there's a big difference between healthcare and healthcare insurance. So when we look at healthcare, is healthcare expensive? Yes, but what is even more expensive is healthcare insurance, and you try to figure out. And I got to tell you, one of the things that's always bothered me, whenever we would try to talk to people in the insurance business, I myself we have a private business. We knew every year we were going to get an increase, and when I would ask every year, why are we getting an increase? They'd say, well, because of your claims. And I'd say, well, I'm at this business every day. I don't know what claims you're talking about. What claims are you talking about? And the answer is, well, we can't discuss that with you.
Sorry.
That's private. So I think there's a disconnect, and you try to figure out, why is it that you can come in and tell me all the time that we've reviewed your account and this is what the new premiums are going to be? And when I ask them, I don't understand, why is it going up so dramatically? And if you're telling me there's all these claims, I'd like to see where they are, because I work here every day with these same people. I don't see what you see. And the answer was always, well, that's something that's private. We can't discuss that with you. And I think that when we talked to the insurance companies, and last week at Ways and Means we had a hearing with some of the biggest insurance companies in the country come in to talk to us, but we never got any real answers as to why we're going in the direction we're going. All we got answers to is, yes, it's more expensive now, then there's reasons for that. We can't discuss those with you, but there's reasons for that. And I think that anytime there's not transparency, anytime it's not really clear as to why did my premium go up, if it's that's the way things go. I don't think that's a very good answer. And the business I'm in, every year people look at cars that come out, they wonder, why did they go up? And we can usually say, well, because of different features we have. But the one market we can't really predict is the previously owned vehicles. And that is the supply and demand. That is basic economics. So when the price of new cars goes up, people will look at something that would be cost less, and that's usually a previously owned car. But even those have risen, and that's really hard today for people, I think, when they look at how is it that I can put everything together, take care of my family, have housing for them, be able to feed them, be able to clothe them, and transportation needs, and going into the future, can I save any money at all to prepare for the future? I think it's become very difficult. But one of the other things that people don't talk about is the fact that we have overprinted. We print paper money all the time. It's really not backed by anything anymore. It's just in the faith that we have in the thing. But when it was on gold, if you go back to 72, the price of gold back then, an ounce of gold was about $37, $40 an ounce. Now it's about $4,000 an ounce. So when people say, well, what do you think changed? I said, it's kind of inflated because of the lack of demand.
And the price of silver's gone up too.
Everything up. But people don't think about silver. They, for whatever reason, they always hear the price of gold. But silver's gone up somewhat, but it's not off the charts. Gold is off the charts. Right. But we rely on paper money. But we rely on a substance that really isn't backed the way it used to be backed. And so I think that's where a lot of things take place right now. This has happened before in past history. And I tell people all the time, please look at what happened in the past. You would see that there's been ups and downs in this, and we've got to be careful about what it is that we do.
Immigration's been at the forefront the last week or so, especially what has been taking place in Minneapolis. I know back in May, ICE came in and apprehended maybe a dozen or so people in the Meadville area, and we learned little about that. Unfortunately, there was been 2 fatalities in Minneapolis. What would you do or suggest needs to be done to calm the situation down? What's your take on what's happening?
Well, there wouldn't be a need for ICE to be anywhere if we had not gone through crazy millions and millions of people coming into the country, undocumented, just here. There wouldn't be a need for that. The election really swung, the last election President Trump won, really swung on the fact that people were concerned about what had happened to our country. Borders apparently meant nothing in the previous administration. So we had a flood of people coming in, and I've heard numbers, and I really wonder about this. When I first ran for office back in 2011, one of the concerns back then, it was about 11 million undocumented people in the country, and I said, well, geez, if they're undocumented, how do you even know they're here? That was back in 2011. Now we're saying that another 12 million came in, 15 million came in, and I think for me, it's really hard. If you don't know the exact number, please don't throw those kind of numbers out. But we do know there was a rush at the borders. We do know those folks are here. We know what took place during the previous administration's 4 years. And I look now, ICE was formed for a specific reason. Local police can't handle the crush. Look what happened in New York. You look all over the place. So ICE went into effect. I would just say that if I were in Minneapolis, or no, it was in Minnesota, I would say, listen, these people are here to do a certain job. I would not be advocating that you act up against the police, get in their face, tell them they shouldn't be here, do all these different things. You stir the pot with that, as opposed to saying, look, there's a job that has to be done. We'll have oversight on it, but quite frankly, we don't have enough persons. We don't have enough people that we can handle this. Let's let that go. I think as we go on, we're going to find out that in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, I was fascinated by the fact that 3 weeks before the first shooting, the concern was about fraud. Now, nobody talks about fraud in Minneapolis. They talk about what's going on. I don't know what happened on the first one. I don't know what happened on the second fatality. All I know is what I've seen on TV. I have not had any conversations with ICE or Tom Homan or any of those folks as to what actually happened. So we're telling people, look, I don't know the exact details. I know what you've seen. I don't know that that's true or not true, but I think you ought to wait and see till we find out what exactly happened, why it happened, and why it continued to be stirring the pot. I think if I were in those positions, if I was either the mayor or the governor, and I served with the governor in Congress at the same time, I would have said, listen, let us look into this, let's settle down, everybody just stay calm, we're going to get through this. I don't like the fact that when you have local politicians stirring it up and then wondering why did it get so out of hand, was because you told them to get out of hand. You told them to get there. You told them to do these different things. And I don't think it serves the country well. I don't think it serves the people in Minnesota. I don't know what's gone on up in Minnesota, but we have to sit back and wait a little bit before we jump at different things. It looks to me like whenever people are taking the law in their own hands, it creates a problem. Our ICE people are there because they were assigned to be there. They just didn't say, I think we'll go up to Minneapolis and see what trouble we can start. They went up there because there was a reason for them to go up there. I wish local politicians, whether it be the mayor or the governor, sit back, say, listen, we're going to try to work with our federal officials to see, we'll work together to find out the answers to all these things, as opposed to playing one against the other. I think for our citizens, it puts them in a bind. They don't know who to believe. And when that takes place, what's happening right up there right now is taking place. And I don't know who all is there, so I can't comment on it.
But you're in favor of, ICE
I'm in
going
favor of
into
law
communities
enforcement.
and
I'm in
getting...
favor of law enforcement. ICE was formed for a reason. And people were complaining about a number of people that were coming into the country, unvetted and just coming into our country. I think that if you look at why did we have to form this group, then we were being overrun and we needed to find out what was going on, and the president was very clear about it, and I think his policy was very clear about it. If you're not here legally, leave the country. You can come back legally later on, but you just can't come here, stay here, flood our borders, go wherever you want to go. And I was down in Texas when they were doing these things, and it was amazing. It was amazing. They couldn't control who was coming across. And I think anytime that happens, usually people would look and say, I think there's a problem here. We ought to be looking and tightening up our borders. So listen, well, however it plays out, we'll find out. I don't think right now, I think I would rather see local law enforcement, local politicians combine their efforts with the feds, the state, the feds, all get together and say, we've got a problem, let's get it settled. You can't have one group going against another group and causing this type of concern that like nobody knows who's in charge. And the truth of the matter is, the feds are in charge, but in this case, all of this turmoil is being stirred up. And if you're a person who believes that something is wrong and you don't know why you feel it's that way, you got to back off and say, let's just slow it down, let's find out what's going on. I know the president ran, and he got elected on the fact that we were the number of people that had come in the country, undocumented people had just come across. We didn't know where they were. We didn't know where they were going to end up. We didn't know any of those things. When we hear stories that happened in New York, where we were housing people, we were doing all these things. We were closing down schools and turning them into places where we could house these people. That's a problem. When you have an overrun like that, that's a problem. And when nobody's in control, nobody's in control. And that's exactly where we were. Okay. Mike, do you have anything to ask?
Yesterday you had an editorial come out in the Post-Gazette about Greenland. And I was
sorry, yesterday?
Yesterday you had an editorial come out in the Post-Gazette on Greenland.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could just kind of elaborate on the importance and why you feel the way you do about Greenland.
Yeah. Well, if you read the editorial, and we've been concerned about it for a couple of years, actually. I've been concerned about the lack of education when it comes to what are we looking at to protect our hemisphere. So if you can go back to Monroe and see that they had a concern then, and then it was followed up by Roosevelt, you say, well, why were they concerned then about what was taking place, and why did they want the world to know that our hemisphere is our hemisphere and not just anybody can come in anytime they want to come in? With Greenland, I tell people all the time, if you don't have a globe or a world map, take a look, and the shortest route to the United States is across the North Pole. It's not around the equator. When you look at who it does have great positions in the North Pole, it's both the Russians and the Chinese. We had, until when we're trying to adapt some right now, we had one ice cutter. That's it. The Chinese were up there, the Russians were up there, we're coming across the top of the world. With Greenland, and I've often wondered about this because we had more military bases in Greenland in the late 40s, early 50s, and there was an effort back then that maybe we should try to see what we can work out with Greenland. We have a lot of territories around the world, and most of the reasons we have them is for protection, whether it's in Guam or whether it's the Hawaiian Islands at one time. When you look at all these different places that we've taken a position in, go down to Puerto Rico, these are all territories. Only this time, whenever we talked about Greenland, and I think the president, and I tell people, please read The Art of the Deal, because he always starts off with a position, because that is his nature. As far as Greenland's concerned, Greenland is a very important place. First of all, it's one of the biggest sources of fresh water in the world, but also strategically and with rare earth assets, it's very important. It's not important until it becomes important, and I think we have been in a lull for so long. We had Korea and we had Vietnam, but as far as world wars were concerned, we've kind of been unattentive to what's going on in the rest of the world. So we've watched the expansion of China and what they've done. We've watched the expansion of Russia and what they've done. I was more surprised whenever the Russians took over Crimea and nobody said a word about it. We knew that was a problem, and then and now we have all these things popping up, and people are saying, well, why we didn't see this coming? I said, well, it's because you weren't looking. But when it comes to Greenland, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't have a stronger position in Greenland. As far as us buying Greenland, I don't know that that'll ever happen. But I think the fact now, it's risen to a point where everybody is looking at it. They're more aware of Greenland today than they were last year at this time. If you had asked anybody last year about, so what's so important about Greenland, they'd say, I have no idea. What's so important about Iceland? I have absolutely no idea. So why would you have no idea? Because it's not in the news. It's not in anybody's. There's no reason to worry about it. Well, there was a reason to worry about it. The Chinese and the Russians were building up military strength up in those areas. That should have been reason enough to us to say, this is a wake-up call.
You started off by emphasizing that your agenda is always the same, that it's focused on local concerns and driven by what people in the area are talking about.
Yeah.
Is this interest in Greenland in keeping with that sort of focus on local concerns?
Yeah, the fact that you're asking me about it is exactly why we did it. What I'm surprised is more people aren't aware of the Chinese at both ends of the Panama Canal. I'm surprised that people are concerned about Cuba at the deep water ports. If you look back, we talked about that 3 years ago. So when I say this is my main concern, this is now a concern for all of America. So the fact that you're bringing it up, I'm glad somebody's reading this stuff and taking it. I've had more people ask me about this. And I said, have you ever looked at a map? Have you ever looked at the globe? Have you ever looked at it? They said, well, no, not really. I said, take a look at that and find out where Russia is, find out where China is, and find out what's the shortest route to our country. And and it's the old story. It's better to be aware of it and prepared for it than to sit there and wait for something else to happen. We have a bad history of waiting till something bad happens before we react. When we know, and then you go back through history, every single thing that's taken place in history is because people have ignored the warning signs that were taking place. Whether it be England, with Chamberlain going meeting with Hitler and saying, yeah, we're going to have peace in our time, that was okay for a couple years, but it wasn't okay permanently. And as we watch Germany grow, we watch Russia growing right now. Putin, of course, he doesn't like the idea of the USSR, right? He didn't like the Soviet Union. He wanted to return it to Mother Russia. He has a goal. People have goals, and I think the more you're aware of things, the better it is. So the pieces that we wrote, quite frankly, I sent to everybody, and I was surprised that hardly anybody picked it up. The people that did pick it up, and people said, oh, well, yeah, we saw this. We hadn't thought about this in a long time. I said, we haven't thought about a lot of things in a long time. We feel pretty safe and comfortable where we are, and we're never worried until something bad happens. When then something bad happens, it's like, if you knew this was possible, why didn't you do something about it ahead of time? I'm not saying for us to be aggressors, but I am saying you better get ready. You better get ready, because this isn't such a peaceful world. By the way, take a look at Africa. You want to look at rare earths? Take a look at Africa and see who's making the most headway in Africa. You'll find out that China's all over Africa, and it's not for any reason other than the fact that there's advantages there for them. We are fighting, not outwardly, we are fighting a movement that's been taking place for a long time. You can't explain to me what happened in South America when it became part of the BRICS. So why did that happen? Because we let it happen.
The Chinese, you just referred to the Chinese investment in Africa. And that's something they're doing not just in Africa but around the world. And
yeah, they are.
Have been doing for decades.
They're pretty public about what they're doing.
Yeah, and pretty successful so far.
Well, there's no opposition.
So does the recent focus on the Western Hemisphere and the disinvestment in foreign aid around the world under the Trump administration, does that serve the purpose of countering Chinese?
Have you ever seen the work that we've done around the world? This is not, by the way, I'm not interviewing you, I'm just asking. But if you haven't checked, now here, we have done incredible things around the world. We're very reluctant to take credit for any of it. If you would look what's happened in Africa, we've done incredible work in Africa. You know, the biggest problem in Africa is the fact that they're aquifers. They don't have good water. They don't have some of the same assets that we have that would build the health. The youth is the most valuable asset we have. So if they're not healthy and they're not educated, they're subject to anything that bad could happen. With the Chinese are very good at what they do. They go in and help a lot of people, but at the end of the day, they get more credit for it than we would ever get. We've done more for the world than any other country. And if I say, well, you just feel that way because you're an American, I feel that way because it's the truth. We have helped more countries and at more times than anybody else in the world. We're always the first ones there. We're always the first ones to help, and we're the last ones to take credit for it. If you look at what China has done, they've been very smart about the way they've done what they've done, and they have really made major improvements in Africa, but they've taken credit for it, and believe me, they have a much stronger position in Africa than we do. If you want to look for rare earth, look at what Africa has. Now, Africa has its own problems too internally. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you better beware of what's taking place in the world today. You can't sit there and say, boy, it's really been nice. We haven't had any problems since when was it? And it's been a long time ago. It's been like almost half a century, 3/4 of a century ago. The world's only been safe because we made it safe. Then when we back off, and we have a history of this, history shows it, we go in, something happens in Europe, we leave our country, we go over there and we feel pretty safe. We got oceans surrounding us, nobody can get to us. It's not that way anymore. It's not that way anymore. With some of the weapons that are out there, if something's fired within 90 seconds, it can hit its target in the United States. It's incredibly dangerous right now. And look, I'm not preaching or teaching. I'm just telling people, please, all these things are out there for you. Look at what's important in your life. Maybe there is something that you're real wrapped around the axle, and that's great, but you better have a general understanding of globally what's taking place. And if you see the rise of China, and China is the one that I worry about more than else, is they're very quiet about it. If you think that they're not figuring on taking Taiwan, then we're just not paying attention. Russia's been more focused about it, but I think Putin has a problem. He wants Russia to be Mother Russia again. I think he has a real drive for that, no matter what it costs. Obviously, with what's happening in Ukraine, it's not loss of life. Our president talks about all the time, not about power, not about anything other than the fact the loss of life, which I think that's pretty important. But look at the Mideast, look anywhere right now. The world's on fire everywhere. And it's really hard for us. We can't keep control of everything, but we should try to be as much of a presence as we can, understanding that in the long range, what's safe, when the world's safe, America is safe, and the world is safe when America's there to help.
To go back to your focus on Africa for a second.
Yeah.
Those great things that the U.S. has done there include the fight against AIDS in particular,
Yes, yeah.
and a lot of the things that were accomplished and led by USAID. But the support for AIDS treatment in Africa has been cut extremely by the Trump administration, and the USAID agency was done away with entirely.
Yeah.
And you're making a really compelling argument for U.S. foreign investment around the world, and that seems like an argument against the Trump administration America First agenda.
I don't think, I think if you look at what the president's concerned with, is the fact that if we're going to spend something, let's make sure we're spending it the right way. So when you look at the amount of fraud, and it's the best line in any movie was in A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth. What the American people need to know is where their tax dollars are going, and if they see some of the things that we were supporting through these different aid groups, they would be appalled and say, well, that's not really aid, that's something completely different. I would just say this, you've got a president who's very much a business guy to begin with. And as I said earlier, if you read The Art of the Deal, most of the things he starts with is a conversation that people would say, that's impossible, that's never going to happen. And then all of a sudden it gets to the point, well, we're actually sitting down at the table and we're talking about it. The money that we spend, there should be a return on that investment, a solid return on that investment. And if you have looked through some of the programs, and then you tell me, you know what, this was a complete waste of money, and there was so much fraud going on. I don't think the president had trouble with U.S. aid. I think what the president had trouble with U.S. dollars being wasted on foolish projects that had no return on the investment.
If we go back for a second to the earlier conversation on healthcare,
Okay.
Is there anything specific that Congress can do to? You mentioned the idea that you can't get answers from the insurance industry.
Yeah. Well, but the problems with insurance. Listen, we're talking about health care, but the biggest part, the most expensive part, is health care insurance. So I don't know what you all have here. I related to you what I would go through every year at the dealership. Now, the reason I was interested is, number one, when you're in a very competitive environment and you're looking for talent, it's not just the dollars that you get paid on payday, it's what other benefits do you have? Do you have retirement programs? Do you have a health care program? What do you have? When you're in that type of competition, then you're looking all the time. I want to make sure that my team is healthy. I want to make sure that my team is confident that when they come in every day to work, that it was worth giving up a day of their life to do it. So, and we're all very family oriented. When we talk about healthcare insurance, so they can't tell you why they can't tell you. You can't sit down. You can't sit across them and say, okay, tell me exactly where the cost went that it went so high. And they'll say, well, there's more cases of that. I say, no. I can tell you from my personal experience, sitting down across from people who were selling us healthcare insurance. They might sell us healthcare. I don't get healthcare from an insurance company. I get healthcare from doctors. I get healthcare from hospitals. I get healthcare. That's the problem that people get confused. Healthcare is one thing, but I've had 2 stents. I've had a TAVR put in. I'm supposed to get my knees replaced, and somebody asked me, geez, what do you think about that? I said, I think if I had lived 100 years ago, none of it would have been possible. I probably would have been dead long before where I am right now. So listen, we have great health care. The health care insurance companies cannot explain to you why it costs so much. And I would ask any of you, look at these different institutions. We talked to the one guy, the guy had 300,000 people working for him for this health care insurance company. And I'm thinking, I bet your payroll has an awful lot to do with what healthcare insurance. And by the way, what I thought was unfair, some of the conversation when we started telling the healthcare insurance people what the chiefs of these, what they were making. They're making whatever the market bears. You're all making whatever the market bears. I make whatever the market bears. If there's a better offer to do something else, we're probably going to look at what's better for my family. Should I look where I can make more money? Well, making more money isn't always the best job. There's an awful lot. I would rather live here in Meadville than New York City. There's not enough money in the world to pay me to go to New York City. Going to Washington 3 weeks out of a month is expensive enough. So it's an economic situation, right? And so when you look at all of these healthcare insurance companies, I'm not talking about guys who replace hearts and replace knees and who do all this incredible work. I'm talking about the companies themselves. Have they grown so big that the cost of healthcare insurance has to rise in order to fill that? I mean, I'm assuming you all, there's payroll, but in our place it's two times a month. Well, the only thing that makes us able to pay payroll is to have a successful run business. You can't run in the red and expect us to come out in the black. So a lot of it to me is just math. I think we've gone way beyond this idea of why these things cost that way. I said, do the math. Just do the math. Don't get wrapped around the axle and all these other messages out there and all these different curveballs that they throw you. Just do the math. Do the math. And as I said last week when the health insurance people, the heads were there and they were talking. I thought some of my colleagues were wrong. They started complaining that they made too much money. And I said, well, that's not the issue here. We want to find out what is it we can do. We know healthcare, we do things differently today than we did before. But the cost of insurance for these, is it affordable for people? Because I don't think today, depending on who the person is, that you can afford not to have some kind of healthcare insurance. And the same is in our business. You know the way how we keep premiums down? If you buy an automobile, I'm sure you all have automobile insurance. How do you lessen the payment? High deductibles. So how would you like to have a healthcare insurance where you had to spend the first 10 grand of your own money, then it would kick in? I said, God, give me that. That's a nice model. But I know I only know this because of being in the private sector and almost going broke a couple times and looking at it, because it always is a math. This thing has always bothered me with healthcare insurance is I know everybody in Pennsylvania has to have insurance. The question is, how much can you afford to pay? Well, we can make your premium this big or this big or this big, depending on how much you want your deductible to be. If you're responsible for the first whatever it is, $7,000, $10,000, $20,000, we can get your premium down, but you've already had out-of-pocket expenses. So what was the purpose of having insurance? I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm just telling you that I'm just talking basic math. We get wrapped around the axle. All these people they use more acronyms than anybody could possibly believe. I'm surprised we have an alphabet that will support it all. And nobody knows what it is that they're talking about. We're a bobblehead society. They tell us it's this, and we go, oh, yeah, okay. You know what that means? No, I don't have a freaking idea. What does it mean? And then you say, oh, that's what it means. Oh, no, I don't need that. So I'm telling you, we have gone so far away from basics. And I tell people, please do the math. Just do the math. If you can look at your life right now, I don't care what you get paid. What you get paid is what the company's paying you. What you get to take home is after everybody else has taken a chunk out of it. And keep in mind, the percentage that we take always goes right up at the top of what was your gross. It doesn't say, okay, here's what the feds took out. Okay, here's what this. It doesn't go here. It goes all the way back up. And by the time we're done, we have very little to show for the work that we put in, the effort that we put in, the hours that we put in, the talent that we put in. We're all in that boat. We're all in that boat.
I just had one other question.
Sure.
And then, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about Minneapolis,
Yeah.
the idea of kind of turning down the volume, slowing down in our reaction to
Yeah.
figuring out what's wrong. And you know, an inescapable topic over the past 5-10 years
Yeah.
has been the increasing polarization of people across the country. Do you feel like there's anything that we can or should be doing to turn down the volume on that polarization?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when we had really strong nuclear families, and we had people that had a strong background on raising a family, making sure that faith was a big part of who it is that you were, and actually learning, be educated, and not take your education from watching Fox at night. I don't watch Fox. I don't watch any of these people because all they do is sell advertising. You know the game. The more people I can get to watch me, the more price per point. They come out with outrageous things. Now they can say one thing on Monday night and say completely opposite on Tuesday night, and they'll still have the same number of people tuning in. I think that we've had such a lack of just basic knowledge. That all comes down to education, though. If I get my education out of watching an hour show on a night and say, okay, I got all the facts, I said, you didn't get the facts at all. You just got something they wanted to put on that keep you fastened to that TV. That builds the price per point up. I think the biggest loss we've had is what you guys are doing. I mean, I watched the Butler Eagle. We still do a lot of stuff in the Butler. The newspapers have almost become, why would I read it there? I can watch it on TV and get the news right now. No, you can get an opinion piece right now. You can't get the news. And I think one of the biggest things that we have lost local touch with what's going on. You know, I just find it kind of inconvenient that whenever Minneapolis or whenever Minnesota is looking at this, a tremendous amount of fraud, within 2 weeks, it switches right away. Do you remember, by the way, some comrades of mine that I served with in Washington, D.C., talking about if you get a command to do something, you don't have to do that if you don't think it's right. Now, they said that, and all of a sudden they went back then to 2 weeks whenever the drug boats from Venezuela, wherever it was, and I thought every one of those members, and I know them all, timed it really well. When I look at what's going on in Minneapolis right now, I think it's horrible that this young lady lost her life. I think it's horrible that this young man lost their life. My question is, where were they from and why were they there? Why? Why were they there? Why would somebody from 3 states away or whatever, why would they go to Minneapolis? And I watched in the Summer of Love, burning down police departments, burning down buildings, all these shootings that took. Where's the outrage of what the shootings that took place during the Summer of Love? It was what people will do, what people will do. I really believe that we need to have more honesty in the way things are presented. When people ask, like you asked me, I don't know what happened in Minneapolis. I don't know what happened with the ICE agents. I don't know what happened to this young man over the weekend. One thing I do know, they're not from Minneapolis. They're not from Minneapolis. And I served with Walz. Walz is exactly who Walz is. You saw him when he was running for office. I don't know the young mayor at all, but he looks like a carbon copy of the governor of Newsom out in California with the same type of approach to things. That's not a criticism. That's people play a role that they think they have to play a role for the part that they're trying to get. A lot of these things. Why did it get so? Why did it get so incendiary? What brought it about? And this is we're in Meadville. We're talking about something that happened in Minneapolis. What's happened in Meadville lately? What's happened in Erie lately? What's happened in Butler? What's happened in Grove City? What's happened in Pittsburgh? What's happened? What's happened? The narrative gets driven. Local newspapers used to be the first thing that everybody read. Nobody tuned in at night to watch these characters. I mean, why would you think your whole day revolved around the fact that you had to watch somebody on MSNBC or somebody on CNBC or somebody on Fox or somebody, and these things have sprung up all over the place now. I don't know how many of these news things are out there. Newsmax, News Minimum, News Overall, I don't know. But they're all selling, well, they sell advertising. They sell advertising. If we think that they're interested in the news, they're not interested in the news. They're interested in the number of people watching their show at any one time. That drives price per point. Now people say, oh, I can't believe you say things like that. I said, well, I know what it cost me to run an ad in the newspaper. I didn't run an ad in the newspaper because I didn't think people knew what Chevrolets look like. I want to run an ad in the newspaper so people know, yeah, there's Chevrolets for sale right now today in your town. That's why you do it. And that's what I'm saying. I'm on your side, by the way. I think the lack of people reading newspapers. I even know who reads newspapers anymore. Butler Regal says they're online. I would never go online to read anything. I guess you could say I'm old school, but the school I came from, where people had come through the Great Depression, had gone off to World War II, had come back. Some of them had come back and went right off to Korea to get involved in another situation. The world that I grew up in is so different than the world that's out there right now. And when I talk to people who ask me, what's it like to go to Harrisburg every week? I say, well, I actually don't go to Harrisburg. They say, seriously? Well, I thought you were our congressman. I said, I am. Well, why don't you go to Harrisburg? That's the capital. I said, that's Pennsylvania capital. I'm actually in federal government. That's in Washington, D.C. They go, yeah? I go, yeah. That's actually where I go. And I'm more concerned, Mel knows this too, I think the greatest opportunity right now to serve your community, get on school board. Get on school board and please take a look at the curriculum and take a look at textbooks and say, oh my God, you guys don't teach government anymore, why not? There's been such a change in the country. I was truly blessed, I wish I'd known it at the time, by being raised by people that come through the Great Depression, World War II, Korean War, been through all these hard times. They made it safer for the next generation, but the next generation, I think, has taken it for granted that it's always going to be safe. Why is that? Because it's always going to be safe. It's only going to be safe as long as we're aware and we're paying attention. All these other things that are taking place, if we're not aware of it, as you asked me about Greenland, if we're not aware of the strategic importance of Greenland, if we're not aware of the strategic importance of the Panama Canal, if we're not aware of the strategic importance of the deep water ports in Cuba, if we're not aware of what's going on in South America, and the fact that one of the that has so many assets, and look where they are now. If you can tell me, compare old Venezuela to the Venezuela that we just went into, please tell me that these people were living a life of luxury. They went from being one of the most efficient, one of the wealthiest countries in that part of the hemisphere to one of the poorest, one of the ones that, and why? Elections. People lose elections. Things change, but I think we become so worried, and I will say this to you, I don't know, the guy in Washington right now is different than anybody that's ever sat in there. And some people love him, some people hate him, but the one thing I will say, he's not going to sit there and watch anything go wrong with the United States and sit back and say, well, it just wasn't politically the right thing to do at that time. We better forget the goddamn politics and start looking at the policy. We've allowed policy to become second place to politics because we know we can drum up some type of a movement that'll get on board with us. Please, the United States is not great because of any type of political action. It's great because of the policy that we follow. If you go back to the very beginning, there's no place in the world that started that way or was able to maintain itself. And we've done more to save the world than anybody, and I just hate the fact that we find more reasons to criticize ourselves than to say, you know what, maybe there's a part that I can play. Maybe it's not exactly what I want, but I need to get on my school board, I need to get on my city council, I need to get on, if I can offer something, I need to do that. The main thing I gotta do, I've got to raise my family the right way so that this next generation doesn't expect it just to fall into place and understand that somebody paid a great price. And when 1.5 million Americans in uniform gave up their life for us to be able to do this today, that should be significant. And if it's not, then that's our problem because we didn't pass it on to the next generation.
All right. Well, thank you, Congressman Kelly.
Thank
is there
you.
any
Just
final
Mike,
thing you'd like to say?
there's a whole bunch of us running. There's 435 running around down there. So.